And I will say, too, with what you were saying about Barry's character, he's probably the most Barry in this movie compared to his previous appearances. But the other Barry is so bad. That character was so annoying. He chortled like a dolphin, and I was not a fan. Yeah, that's exactly what he sounded like. And I hated it.
I'm impressed with myself.
I was spot on. I haven't seen it in so long, but you just brought me back to it.
Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
World!
I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
Welcome, everybody, to the One Night Film Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Mossberg, and I got Zach with me today. We're going to be talking about The Flash. We had a week off. I kind of got married, so that was cool.
Heck yeah.
Actually, next time Ellie is on, you will see her officially as the girlfriend, the fiance, and then the wife. And yeah, Zach was actually in my wedding, which is pretty cool. We had 3 of the podcast hosts. But today, we are back at it talking about The Flash. Zach has been really wanting to do this for a while. Mostly because I hear you. I hear you in your pain. Because, thank you. I hear you in your pain because you were a Flash fan of the TV show. Most people were. The hard part is that it was a good first 2 seasons, even if it still was cheesy. It was decent.
I would argue 3.
3.
I know we've had this debate before, but
well, I forgot what the third season was.
Third one's Savitar.
I thought that was the second one. Man.
No, second one's Zoom.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I didn't mind the Savitar one, especially because that was kind of the Barry also losing another person he loved, which was Iris, trying to prevent that because he already knew that it was kind of impossible to save his mom. But before we get into the actual show, I wanted to talk about who is the Flash. That's why we do these character studies, is to talk about what is consistent over all of the iterations of it that is known as that character. So first, as we're asking who is the Flash, we also have to differentiate Barry Allen and Wally West, which you probably know better than I do what that actually is. I don't read comics. I don't watch cartoons. I just know that Wally was brought into the show at some point and wasn't really Wally. It was just kind of a name. So, I mean, Kid Flash, obviously, that is what he goes as in the show. But apparently, I didn't know this for a while, Wally becomes the Flash after Barry dies, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, yep. That's in the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. After Barry makes the sacrifice in the comic is when Wally takes up the mantle after that.
Yeah, I was going to say that was in the comic because that in the TV show it was...
No, that doesn't happen in the TV show.
It was Oliver who gave the sacrifice.
There's actually 3 Flashes if we're really getting into it. There's also Jay Garrick, but he's different, so...
But he's kind of from the 40s, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the old one who's kind of a different character.
But it's interesting that even though it's the older Flash from the 40s in our world, it's also the Flash in their world from the 40s, the archaic, the old wise one, I suppose. Yeah. I think we'll talk about specifically how Jay Garrick is handled in the show when we get there. But we're going to talk about the core story of... Well, first off, how would you like to talk about the Flash as the character? Do you want to just talk about Barry or just talk about Wally or just talk about them back and forth? Because for me, I think Barry Allen is the Flash only because that's what I'm used to from the show. And unfortunately, I think that's what a lot of people think, when in actuality, I think a lot of people who read comics like Wally as the Flash and would want to see Wally in the DCU be the Flash. Do you have a reason why?
I think Wally was the more popular version in the comics. I think he is like the fastest speedster, or at least he's pretty close to that.
I'll get to that in a bit.
In the comics. Yeah, I grew up watching Wally as the Flash in Justice League Unlimited, who was a combination kind of both characters, being a forensic scientist, which is typically just Barry, but also having the name and the appearance of Wally West. And it was really cool in that show. I think we'll talk more specifically about him later when we get to the different iterations. But then it was funny. I remember as the Flash show was starting and I heard it was going to be Barry Allen as the Flash, I was like, why isn't it Wally West? I want more Wally West. So I was a little hesitant at first when I heard it was going to be Barry, but then I think after the first episode of the show, I was like, oh yeah, Barry's awesome.
Can I ask you how old you were in 2014 when it first aired?
I was 12.
That's funny. I don't know. 12-year-old Zach.
I mean,
getting
you're only
excited
like
about the Flash.
13.
Yeah, you're right.
I got excited about a lot of superheroes back then.
You were probably keeping up with it way more than I was. I didn't really get into it until probably Guardians Volume 2 is when I really started enjoying superheroes.
Oh, really? Wow. Anyway, yeah, then I watched the Flash show with my family for a while. I think I kept up with it until like halfway through season 6. Mm-hmm. Which is when I really started to realize, hey, this show hasn't been good for like 2 seasons.
You're really shoving it down. And you're like, I gotta enjoy it. I have to.
Yeah, but when they messed up Crisis is when I was like, oh, this is done for. So
sure.
I don't know if I really have too much of a preference of who I prefer. I think they're both interesting characters who are hard to differentiate at times. But I'd say I'd probably lean slightly more towards Barry.
Okay. So when we talk about the core story of The Flash, we have Barry Allen, who is known for being inspired by his mother's death by some mysterious circumstances. And then, at least in the show, again, this is all going off of the show, so pardon my ignorance. And the movie. The movie is, I would say, follows the core story pretty well, even if it's not the greatest movie. As in, he wants to change his mother's death. And when he finds out that he has that power, he thinks that'll change everything, but in reality, it's just going to make things different and not what he has come to love and appreciate. So that's kind of Barry Allen's story. And again, I don't know what's canon or what's set as like, okay. So when I ask what's the core story, every single Superman iteration is sent from Krypton as a baby. Yeah. Every single Bruce Wayne loses his parents in an alleyway after an opera. Like,
we're talking about the canon events.
Yeah. The canon. Yeah. There you go. I forgot that was in our lifetime, set in stone rule for superheroes. Can you, as the more professional Flash all-knower of knowledge, can you what are the things that need to happen to make it a Flash story, whether it's Barry or Wally?
I was just looking it up today because I was like, I didn't know what Wally West's origin was exactly. And what his origin was that he was visiting Barry's crime lab. And the same thing just happened to happen.
That's funny.
That's his comic origin. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I guess in both iterations, for both characters, I should say, getting struck by lightning is kind of the founding moment of the character, how they get their abilities. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Barry, his mother was killed when he was young, so that kind of motivated him to kind of seek justice and look out for the little guy and all that. I think what really made Wally the Flash was Barry. From what I read, it sounded like Wally's backstory is that he didn't grow up with the best parents. So he was, and I think Iris was actually his aunt in the comics, I think. And his uncle was Barry, and I think he spent a lot of time with his aunt and uncle, and Barry was a real role model for him. So I think that's how he kind of what sets him on that path of heroism.
So pretty generic, gets superpowers and is motivated in some way.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I knew that much. I thought there was more to it than that.
I hope no Flash fans get mad at me, but I think that's all there is in terms of their origin.
Yeah, and this isn't an extensive look at every single iteration. It's just what makes it a Flash story. And certain stories start in a different spot. Like the Flash movie, he already has his powers because we followed him through Justice League a little bit, but he still kind of does the Flashpoint thing, and we learn his backstory, even though he already has his powers. But I think something, as we look away from just literal things that make the Flash, thinking about what goes on morally and mentally with him, and I'm talking about Barry for now, the whole concept of letting his mother die has been explored, I think, very well in the show. Not so much in the movie, but I think that is Flashpoint. That's the most popular storyline of the Flash, is to want to change something in the past because he can. And just because he can doesn't mean he should. And just coming to terms with the bad things that happen and just realizing that that's life and it's the fallen world we live in. I think where Batman is all about this, the evil never leaves. There will always be sin. No matter how many bad guys he puts away, there will still be crimes committed and humans will still be sinful. Like, that's Batman's story. In a similar way, the Flash kind of understands it's contemplating fate almost. And I believe the show kind of goes into fate a little bit maybe, and how some things you just can't change. And that's kind of canon events like from Across the Spider-Verse. But it's not even canon events because the Flash can change them. Mm-hmm. But should he? And that's the point, is that if he changes them, he doesn't become the Flash, is the basic premise. I know that it can be explored more than that. But it's also about dealing with trauma. And like we'll talk about him being OP in a second. But when he discovers he can time travel, that's where his mind immediately goes, is because he loved his mom. And yet, even if you have all the superpowers to deal with the problem, sometimes there are still things that you can't deal with as a human. And that's Barry's thing, is that he is a human with powers. I believe Cyborg is really the only other one who's like that. Batman doesn't technically have powers. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman are somewhat meta-humans. Not like the show says, but like they're not human, but they're human-ass people. That's just the word that came to mind, I guess. Yeah, not all problems can be solved with superpowers. And that's what makes Flash probably one of the more meaningful superheroes, and why people like him is because I remember shedding tears for the scenes where they ended up back in the old home in the show, and Barry holding his mom or watching him hold his mom. And then I know that it returned to that in season 9 for the finale, but I didn't watch that one. But in seasons 1, 2, and 3, whenever they would go back to that home, it would always be caressing his mom and loving her in her final moments. And even, just that whole storyline of him realizing that all he can do is hold her and let her die because it's the way the world works. It's gross and it's sinful. It's part of the sinful nature of the world and how it's fallen. And yet that's just, I don't want to say that's the way the cookie crumbles because it sounds so flippant, but there's only so much control you can have. And even when you technically have all the control, it's not the best.
Yeah, one of the first episodes of season 1, I think, is called Some Things You Can't Outrun, or something like that. And I think, and that encapsulates kind of the whole character pretty well. Is that, he just kind of has to accept some of these things, like his mother's death and all that, that just things happen. And sometimes, even as you say, like in the movie, there's some problems that can't be fixed and you just kind of have to embrace them and move on.
And then the character of Barry is just one of being sympathetic. And I feel like that might come from his being a victim of sorts by watching his mother's death. And again, caring for the little guy. As a former human, he is human, but he's got superpowers. He is very sympathetic to the people who don't have that ability, and that's where his moral responsibility comes from. There's a lot of different ways that a superhero can be inspired. I would say the Flash is closest to Superman, where he says, I have these powers, let's use them for good. It's a little harder to do that because humans naturally tend towards evil, and so when they have power, yes, there comes great responsibility, but there comes a selfishness that comes with it. And that's what makes superheroes super, is when they have these powers, they use them for good. And I know shows like The Boys or Invincible kind of deal with what if superheroes weren't as moral and they just did what they wanted. And that is interesting to explore. It's getting kind of old at this point, but you kind of assume that they would be nice and good and save you. And yet those characters that I just mentioned don't always do that. They're selfish in their own right. But the Flash, Superman, Wonder Woman kind of have a responsibility. Batman's more vengeance, and others fall along those lines, but Superman's the most popular one. Yeah, and Barry wants to do right. He wants to make the world just a little bit better, little by little. And we'll talk about how he kind of becomes overpowered in just a few minutes, but he still is kind of a street-level hero, honestly.
Yeah, I would say, Superman and the Flash especially are your two, like, real public figure type heroes compared to most other heroes. I think the Flash is a lot more personal, though, than Superman is. I think Superman is like a god to the people of Metropolis, pretty much. But in most iterations of him, like, the Flash is actually someone people have conversations with and stuff like that. I'll bring it up. We're going to talk more about the different versions later, but there's a scene with the cartoon Flash from the DCAU where he's just running by people on the road and he's like talking to all of them and he's saying their names and everything. He's like, oh, hey, Mrs. Green, I'll paint your fence later today and stuff like that. And he's just he cares for the little guy and the simple things like that.
Yeah, Superman kind of had to figure out how to act like a human. I know it's not the strongest argument because he was raised by humans, but Batman, Bruce Wayne, is a billionaire who kind of stands above them all. Wonder Woman's similar to Superman, Aquaman's similar to Superman. They're not originally humans, whereas Barry has that connection with them. Yeah, he's very personal. He's one of the most personal superheroes, and that's probably what makes us like him. I mean, I think one thing that I heard somebody say is the difference between Barry and Wally is that Barry is kind of the dad. He's the dad jokester, and Wally is one that looks up to that and tries, but kind of fails, typically talking about jokes. Whereas Barry just kind of openly has a dad joke, like, I'll be back in a flash. And he says it with pride. And then Wally kind of says it and it's kind of falls flat, but he still does it. It's not like he's ashamed of it, but yeah, things like that.
I think more than most heroes too, he's just like genuinely loved by his city. And the personal thing is a part of that. But you know, like in The Flash, there's a whole episode with the Flash Day and everything. And there's a whole episode of Justice League about the Flash Museum and all that. And it's just, he's like genuinely loved by the people around him more than I would say even like Superman is.
I want to ask you, do you think the Flash is overpowered?
Is the Flash overpowered?
There are different iterations, of course. Barry is the fastest man alive. We were reminded at the beginning of every episode or every season? I don't know.
Every episode.
Fastest man alive. But apparently, and this is where I'm going to try and be as excited as I should be for superhero lore that I know nothing about except for secondhand. Wally is the fastest man in the multiverse because Barry obviously died, so he can't be the fastest man alive anymore. But there are instances of Wally being faster than light in some sort. I believe there was the two that I'm thinking of from the videos that I watched was that he saved a whole city, like 50,000 people, from an atomic bomb in 0.00001 microseconds.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
So again, their bodies would be soup because they can't move that fast. But disregarding that, there was that instance, and then I think there was another where there was a teleporting machine that had no delay, and it should have whatever measurement of micro nanoseconds they have. The teleporter can teleport something or someone immediately, like however small that measurement is, and Wally still beat them to the other side. So yeah, Wally is basically a god, but I think that's again part of the attraction of the Flash is that he can be a street hero and a god at the same time. And again, this is just in the fictional world of the DC different universes that there are, because there's only one God, and we're not saying that the Flash is any match for God, but with his mind going so fast, with his body going so fast, like it's unlimited, it's infinite, and yet he still kind of runs around on the street to just. There was one instance where a villain stole a girl's lollipop, and Barry said, "Don't do that," and the villain had space-time powers, and Barry chased him across space-time or something. Or maybe it was Wally. It must have been Wally because I was watching videos about Wally. And after a bunch of space-time jumping and all that, Barry traps him and then has him hand over the lollipop and goes and gives it back to the girl. So it's like he still does little things like that, and that's why he's so likable.
Oh, the crazy thing about Wally, too, is that around the early 2010s, DC had this big reboot that's called the New 52 reboot. I don't know if you heard of it, where they kind of started over in a sense with kind of new versions of each character.
Yeah.
And, Barry was back for that. They brought him back, and that's when the Wally West was African American. That's where that started. But then they brought back the original timeline Wally West as well, eventually, which was a crazy. I don't know too much more about that, but that's just crazy.
Okay, that is cool. Or not cool. I don't know. Is that good or bad?
It was. I think it was good. I'm not bad to comics, so I'm not too much in the know. I think that was pretty well received, but I think that Wally was faster than either of the other two Flashes.
Cool. Yeah, if there are any Flash fans listening, please correct us in our Discord. Like, we want to know this stuff. Comments. We just don't. we don't know this stuff, and we're ashamed of it. So please correct us gently, nicely. Use nice words. You're a big boy, and you can speak like an adult.
Oh, here's something funny too. I think it may have been in the Crisis on Infinite Earths animated movies that just came out. I don't know if it was in the comic, but when the Flash travels to the world of the Crime Syndicate, which is basically the evil version of the Justice League.
Oh
And you
yeah, I
notice,
know. I'm playing Lego Supervillains. I know what the
oh,
Crime
yeah.
Syndicate.
And he notices that he's way faster on this Earth than he is his normal Earth, and that's because the evil Flash had killed every other speedster.
So he was getting all the Speed Force.
Yeah,
Wow,
which is crazy.
it's cool but not cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we're talking about villains, I think something that the Flash show suffered from a lot, and everyone will say this, is that non-speedsters shouldn't be able to beat Barry or Wally or any speedster. It's a little dumb when he can bullet dodge and yet Captain Cold can freeze him in place, because if he can react to a bullet from a gun and grab it, he should be able to react to Captain Cold bringing his arm over and shooting a much slower beam of frost to his legs. There's a lot of inconsistencies in the Flash, and people have made hours of YouTube videos about it. Some of them are actually pretty funny.
That goes back to, is the Flash overpowered? I mean, because if they didn't have all those weird moments, he would be. So
yeah, and yes, there are speedster villains who are some match for him. At least in the show, they depowered him, which some people have a problem with. I kind of have a problem with that. Not necessarily depowered him, like took his powers away, or inconsistent powers, but that he had to learn to get faster, which again, don't really know how you do that when you're that fast. I guess it's just like running a marathon anyways, or you have to learn how to just train your muscles that way. But I understand how Savitar and Reverse Flash and all those, Godspeed maybe. I didn't get to Godspeed. So
you're forgetting about Zoom.
All of those are actually, I understand those are some sort of opponents, but my argument is that the Flash's problems and villains and conflicts and antagonists should be moral and not physical. I also think of Gorilla Grodd because it's kind of his pairing, but that also kind of makes sense because he's telepathic and can do stuff with Barry's mind. But at the same time, just one punch could end him. But it's all about Barry's choices. What does he choose to do with his powers? That's his internal struggle of, should he go back and save his mom? What are the consequences of that? And then even just the simple save this person or save this person. But I said Batman because I think that's I think of the two boats. But I think that because Barry's will is so strong and his powers are so strong, it's less of a reason to fight against his powers than for the villains to challenge his mind and his decision making and morals. And maybe that's not how every character is written, but I think that that's really where his weakness is. Like, every character has a weakness, or should have a weakness if they're well written. But Barry doesn't really have a weakness except for the Speed Force sucking treadmill that Zoom takes his power. I don't know. It's about the conflict in his mind, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true for any hero. I mean, I think what's really interesting is their internal struggle and how that's kind of usually represented by their external struggle. I mean, Superman, seeing him punch aliens and stuff is fun, but also like I see him like balance like his two natures in a sense is I think really what draws us to the character. And I mean, as you said with Flash, like it's fun to see him run super fast and punch things.
Yeah,
I was watching recap of the show today, and they're like, in this episode he ran super fast and punched someone, and in this episode he runs super fast and punches someone.
And then in this episode
he's kind of just got the one move.
Well, no, haven't you seen the lightning lightsabers from season 7 or 8?
I think I was 8, but that was bad. We'll talk about
that later. Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the One Punch Man idea. I need to watch through the whole One Punch Man series, but it's good to be like, right off the bat in the pilot episode of One Punch Man, he's just like, this is so easy. Why am I even doing this? But it's the moral conflict in his mind. He's just so overpowered. I do want to talk about good iterations of the Flash, what that could look like. And somebody brought up Metro Man from Megamind, which again, Megamind is a phenomenal movie. But he has a super speed moment where he is about to die, technically. Not really. Metro Man rushes around the city, and it's revealed in a flashback. And he's contemplating life and all that, and toying with Megamind. Like, he's standing right behind him, and everyone knows that he could just snap his neck, and Megamind isn't really a threat. But that's kind of what makes the Flash fun, is that he toys with them and doesn't really take the villain seriously, because he's so overpowered. I think in Kill the Justice League video game, there is a moment where Deathstroke or somebody was aiming down sights to hit Barry from afar, and then
Deadshot, yeah.
a Deadshot, and he's looking behind him. He's like, either what
Did
you
you get
looking
him?
at or something smart. Yeah, did you get him? Something smart like that. That's the fun of the Flash, is that he can that it is too easy, but he doesn't make that a problem. He just enjoys it. And I do wonder if there's not cheap ways to take away his powers, like in the show, or does Barry have a kryptonite? I'm not sure. I mean, do you know?
Cold, I think that's what
That's
Captain
true.
Cold is.
That's true, but Captain Cold's only a human, so you
Yeah.
know. No, the cold actually makes sense because
Theoretically, yeah.
theoretically, yeah, the Sub-Zero where nothing can move and all that, but yet he still gets out of it. So I don't know. There's only so much you can suspend your disbelief for.
His true weakness is his morality, kind of as we were already saying. Like if the choice is to do what's right or win, he's going to choose to do what's right. So
Yeah, and that's tough because those two can come very close. And that's what makes it an interesting story. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the different versions of the Flash that we've seen. Let's start with the TV show, the CW show that most people know. Again, they had some things that they got right. Barry's mom storyline before they brought her back as the embodiment of the Speed Force, which I didn't understand. But any of the scenes in his original house as a kid really hit, and I think they did that well. I think somebody said that down the line, the CW lost its heart, and that heart is shown specifically in those Flash episodes and in the Arrow episodes where he's very personal with his mom and with Thea and all that. Or those are the episodes that got you hooked into those series, and they really went downhill after that. There was inconsistent powers. They depowered Flash way too much just for some cheap drama, whether that's losing speed, decreasing in speed. Just happened to be somebody always faster, and it happened to be in sequential order. Like Reverse Flash was the slowest fastest, and then Zoom was the next fastest, and then Savitar was the faster fastest.
Yeah.
It's funny how TV show logic never really makes sense when it just keeps getting worse and worse, or sequel logic for that matter. And the only other thing I've written down before we go off a rant on the show is that I think it's so funny that Star Labs is always broken. Like whenever they pan to a wide shot of Star Labs, it still has that hole in it after like 10 years. And then when they go to a different Earth, it's not broken. And that's how you know you're on Earth 2 or something.
Well, first about the CW Flash, I want to say, like, Grant Gustin is amazing. He did so well at portraying the character. He does the emotions really well, especially. Even in scenes that are just not written well, when he's having like an argument with Iris and it's just so dumb, he still acts it very well. Yeah, I wanted to get that out of the way first.
Yeah, I mean that is a praise of it, is that he does well in embodying that character, and I think he did well. I think he got a little old for the length of the TV show, but I think everyone loves him as the Flash.
What do you mean he got old?
Not like 60 years old, Sonny.
Oh, okay.
You can just see the difference between season 1 and season 9. And
okay.
It shows they could have done an old man Flash type of, not old man, again. I'm really generalizing in old, but you can see his age over the years. Not quite the young spry Flash that usually goes hand in hand with the character. I don't know. What did you think about Jay Garrick and how they connected it from, well, okay, first off,
I was about to say, which Jay Garrick?
It was, sorry.
The actual Jay Garrick?
What do you mean the actual?
John Wesley Shipp? Well, in season 2, there was the fake Jay Garrick, who was actually Zoom.
That's right.
Yep.
Yes, so John Wesley Shipp was the original Flash, but he was Barry Allen in the old show, correct? And then he was Barry's dad, which I actually liked that it was like a cameo or a nod, be like, oh, this is the old Flash mentoring the new Flash as a father mentors a son. And then they still made him the Flash. So they couldn't keep their hands off of that cameo.
Well, and then they actually brought him back as the 90s Flash.
Yeah. Well, that's what I meant, is that he was, or am I remembering it wrong? He was his dad.
Then he was Jay Garrick.
And
then he was 90s Flash.
Oh, yeah, I missed that part.
In the Elseworlds crossover, he comes back. Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, but they already had him as Jay Garrick.
Yeah, and then he ends up sacrificing himself in the Crisis on Different Earths crossover. The 90s Flash.
Spoilers, man.
Sorry.
Spoilers.
Were you intending to watch it?
No.
Okay.
And if anyone hasn't gotten to that, okay, let's be honest. I don't think anyone's going to do a watch through of The Flash and get to that point, or they were diehard fans and watched it when right when it came out. So I don't feel bad about spoiling anything. Oh, okay. So this is the 90s, and then the Jay Garrick is the metal helmet.
Yep.
That's a character from the 40s.
Yes.
Right? This is the 90s Flash.
This is the 90s Flash that they brought back.
Yes.
Next to Barry Allen as Green Arrow.
Yes. I actually really on that note, I really liked Oliver and Barry's team feeling. Like they really felt good together, I guess. They clicked really well.
I love their scene in the first episode of The Flash. You know, where they meet on the rooftop. Do you know the scene I'm talking about? Where Oliver's just like, you can inspire people in a way that I never could. And that's like, so cool.
That's the equivalent of patriotic in the form of superheroes. So like, if you feel very American, you feel patriotic. But if you feel like a superhero, that's the scene that gets you. And yeah, I mean, it makes me want to watch The Arrow again. What else about the TV show? I would encourage anyone who doesn't know what happened in the last couple of years to go watch Sheev Talks videos, because he says he loved the Flash in the first few seasons. He really wanted those shows to be good, or those seasons to be good. And he just goes off on all of the bad things about them. They're very entertaining. And yeah, I haven't watched them in a bit, but I believe Zach has done more research into what went on. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, I just binged some recap videos today. That's all I did. And even I still don't really understand what happened. So, I mean, I guess kind of to just outline the whole show real quick. Do we want to do that? Just kind of season by season with who the villain is?
You're going to have to do that quick.
Okay. Let's see.
If you can do it in under a minute per episode.
Let's see if that. Okay, season 1 is the Reverse Flash. Season 2 is Zoom. Season 3 is Savitar. Season 4 is the Thinker. Season 5 is Cicada. Season 6 starts with Bloodwork, and then who's the other half of season 6? Mirror Master?
Was it Godspeed?
Mirror Master was the other half of season 6.
Okay.
No, maybe it was. No, Godspeed comes later. Then season 7 actually starts with the end of the Mirror Master arc because of COVID. Or Mirror Madam is who she was, actually, because it was a woman.
Whoa.
Then I think season 7 does season 7's Godspeed, and then the Forces in season 7, I think, which was a super dumb storyline. And I don't know who season 8 was. Then there's Red Death is in season 9, I know, and then there's Cobalt Blue in season 9, who's Eddie, which also doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know what happens in season 8, but I think I got all the other ones right.
That was pretty good. I feel caught up. I feel like that's all I needed to know about the TV show.
Well, I'll just tell everyone that I was half planning to watch the whole show before we did this one, but just ran out of time for one thing. And I still kind of, just out of a morbid curiosity, still want to watch all of it. So that might happen at some point, but...
Yeah. Give me a breakdown about Iris, because I really forgot. There's a lot of hate for her in the last couple seasons.
Oh, yeah.
She gets narcissistic, or she gets...
Well, the hate started in season 4 or season 5. Iris West, I mean, starts kind of as his stepsister, which is kind of weird that a romance forms. But we're just going to move past that. So let's just keep on moving. You know, he likes her at first, but she's with Eddie. And then Eddie dies, and then Barry's dating somebody else, and then Patty, who was way better for Barry than Iris was. I'm going to say that. I don't know if you remember Patty.
I remember Patty.
Patty was such a good girlfriend for him. But anyways, then she leaves. Then I think that's where Barry and Iris come together somewhere midway or near the end of season 2. And then they're together for all of season 3, I believe. And then Barry disappears at the end of season 3 into the Speed Force, which is a really emotional moment for them. And then he comes back at the beginning of season 4. And then Iris is leading Team Flash for some reason. Who knows why? And then when Barry comes back, she's still leading Team Flash because she's qualified for that. You know, when you're a reporter, you can just lead superhero teams. That's the same qualifications. And then I mentioned earlier that they had a dumb argument. And that's because eventually she's like, "Why did you leave me, Barry? You left me all alone." The world was going to get destroyed if he didn't leave.
I remember that.
He saved the whole world by going into the Speed Force, but yet she's so petty about that. And then, I mean, she's really the best example of how not to write a female character. I don't know if I've seen a worse female character.
Oh, really? There's some poorly written ones.
Oh, I would say she eventually gets worse than Rey.
Wow.
She probably started. I'll take your better than Rey, but
I'll take your word for it.
And then just kind of how they eventually rope her in more and more, and I mean, she even gets super speed at one point and everything, and
of course she does. Everyone gets super speed.
Yeah, I don't know. They just kind of made her. Yeah, narcissistic, I think, is probably a good word. And then there's the whole bless you.
Thank you.
And then there's the whole "We Are the Flash" thing that started in like season 4. We're the Flash, Barry.
I mean, having just got married, I understand two becoming one.
Yeah.
But that's also very narcissistic to say we are the Flash and your powers are all about me, and yeah. Not sure about that one.
And I don't really know what happens to her in the later seasons, so that's all I thought.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I'm sure Sheaf Talks gets into it plenty because I remember listening to them and being like, oh wow, that really went downhill. Yeah, I mean, people have joked that season 9 turns into the Power Rangers because you have Iris and Barry's daughter, you have Wally, you have Barry, you have Nora back as a speedster, and the CGI too. Like everyone knows about the CW CGI and the villains looking like plastic, and then the lightning sabers. Sure, we'll go with that. At the end of season 7 or 8, where that was so dumb. Like even if Godspeed had figured out how to make a beam of light or a beam of lightning to use as a sword, Barry just looks at them and is like, what? And does it himself. Like there's no character development that could have been explored throughout the series, throughout the season, and it's just he can do it. That's the problem with a lot of superheroes and heroes is that they can just do something.
Man,
there's the Power Rangers.
That looks so bad.
That's not even Wally. I was thinking of the yellow suit. That's still Kid Flash. But,
that's Impulse.
It's Impulse.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind.
And I think this is the one where they're like throwing lightning ninja stars too in this scene. It gets so absurd.
It got so dumb. And then I remember Cobalt Blue.
Yeah.
And that's
the end of season 9.
What's his name?
Eddie.
Yeah, Eddie is Cobalt Blue. I mean, I think again, all second hand. Sheaf Talk said that bringing Eddie back and then reminding him that he's supposed to be angry at Barry for stealing Iris kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. I don't remember exactly how they brought him back, but that vengeance kind of makes sense. But then they kind of just threw it away.
Well, in the recap I watched today, it's like he is somehow 20 years in the future and he thinks he's somebody else. I don't think there's much more of an explanation than that.
All right. Again, we're just hearing what other people heard.
Yeah, maybe they actually explained it more, but I doubt it.
I doubt it. So yeah, you're not going to be as entertained listening to us recap something we haven't watched. I will link Sheaf Talks videos down in the description because they are hilarious and very informative that we should have watched before this episode recorded.
One thing, I think it is probably true for the Flash character in general, but something cool about him is that he like actually cares about innocent lives. I think more than we see the Green Arrow did in Arrow, or especially, I think of like in Man of Steel when they're just like destroying the city at the end, killing thousands of lives. And they never really bring anything up about that. We never really see Superman grieve at all. But in the episode, in the first Captain Cold episode, someone gets hit in the crossfire and we actually see Barry like get really impacted by that. Even though it was just like one person, so like someone died. And that's significant. So I think seeing him really just be... I mean, I think that, as you said earlier, that comes from him being so sympathetic with his own mother dying and everything. He's just really... He's really there for the little guy, which is really cool to see.
Yeah. That means something to him. That's kind of the thing that Tony has in Captain America Civil War movie, where he realizes that it's not all fun and games. Like, there is consequences to all of this. Yeah. All right. You have watched more cartoons than I have. So this is all on you. Tell me about the Flash and the cartoons, the different variations.
I mean, there's only one main one.
Okay.
I think there's only one cartoon Flash that people really talk about.
Okay.
I think, unless there's another one you were thinking of.
I just know that there are cartoons that are sometimes more popular and have a better fan base than movies or TV shows, so I'm not going to ignore them.
Okay. Yeah, I'll talk about the DC AU, the DC animated universe Flash for a little bit. As I said earlier, he's technically Wally West, but he's an amalgamation of both Wally and Barry. And one of the best episodes we see of his character is Flash and Substance is the name of it, which really you really get to see him in his element because almost a whole episode does take place in Central City. And as I was talking about earlier, he's genuinely loved by his city. As I said earlier, he's running down the street and waving at the people in cars and everything like that. He's not always as serious as he needs to be, but he has a passion for the simple things. He knows the citizens of Central City as people rather than just fans. Like, bringing up Megamind again, there's one point in the movie where, he's standing in front of a crowd of people and he just goes, "Hello, citizens." But in this episode of Flash, as he's walking through a crowd of people, he's like saying hi to everyone by name because he actually has a care for each of these people. And a cool thing about him too, and in this episode especially, he knows when a villain just needs to talk, when other heroes would just interrogate him. Because there's a cool scene, because in this episode it's about Captain Cold, Captain Boomerang, and Mirror Master all teaming up to try and kill the Flash. And at one point, Batman, the Flash, and Orion, who's another hero, go to this villain bar
Making your way evil today.
to try and get information about what's going on. And they find the Trickster sitting at the bar. And Orion, who's this superhero, who's this big tough guy, is about to just like interrogate the Trickster. But then the Flash is like, "No, wait," and he's actually like starts talking to him. It's like, "Hey, are you off your meds again?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then Flash is like, "Oh, we've talked about this." And it's like, they ask him what he knows about the whole villain scheme and everything. And then as he's leaving, and he's like, "Once you're done with the drink, turn yourself in." And the Trickster's like, "Okay, Flash."
I actually did see that clip.
Yeah. So he's the Flash I grew up with, so I really kind of take him to heart. And, he was the funny member of the Justice League team. But he was a really cool character who had a lot of, cool stuff about him.
Yeah, he has a heart, and I love that. Yeah, I'd be interested about the other niche cartoons. Again, cartoons does not mean for kids. Animated TV shows are just as good, if not better sometimes.
He doesn't have that many other cartoon appearances that I can think of. I mean, he's been in a couple animated Lego movies and a few episodes of The Batman, some other animated Batman movies, and I guess there's the animated Flashpoint movie. Besides,
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking of some of those.
Yeah, I haven't seen many of those. So
This is just from IMDb, the evolution of the Flash in animated movies, and most of them are Justice League. So maybe those aren't actual. I would love to watch Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox because I've heard that one's really good. Yep. All right. Now, for the moment we've been waiting for, the DCEU, and why am I already forgetting his name?
Ezra Miller.
And Ezra Miller's Flash. Oh boy. So, Ezra Miller was announced with the Justice League, correct? When the Justice League was cast, and he was picked by Snyder to be the Flash, which was also hinted at, which maybe they actually cast in the Justice League, or not in BVS, because that was because he showed up in Batman's dream or something. I don't know if that was actually Ezra Miller.
Yeah, it was Ezra Miller. Because then he shows up,
okay,
in the security footage at the end of the movie too.
Yeah. Okay. So he was cast back then. He appeared in Justice League, and then Justice League Snyder Cut. I really think at that point it's hard to differentiate what was Joss Whedon's rewrite and what was actually the actor's problems. So maybe he caught some, or he hid behind the Joss hate for a little bit. But yeah, the character of Barry became pretty unbearable, even just from his get-go in Justice League. He really acted like Peter Parker, where he was too giddy and too much like a teenager and all that. And his jokes just didn't land. Again, when Wonder Woman and Batman disappeared, he's like, "Oh, do they do that? I guess I'll go now." all that.
Yeah.
And I think that the Snyder Cut did him a little bit better. He made him less of a child. But then they went right back to that for the movie. And boy, was that movie something. First off, when it comes to the Flash movie, I've heard it said that Ezra Miller's Flash was more like Wally than Barry, in the sense that Barry is very confident and Wally is throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that's kind of what Miller ended up playing, was a Wally version, where he was just kind of like in how he acted, not necessarily powers or anything, is he just kind of wasn't confident. He's still growing into his shoes or whatever. And he really kind of still relies on Batman. That's kind of the point of the Flash, is that he's really wanting Batman to pull his weight, both Affleck and then Keaton. I'm just reading my notes here. I don't think the first movie should have been a Flashpoint movie. No. That's supposed to happen after. Yeah, I think everyone can agree with that, but they had to grab him somehow. But Flashpoint is supposed to happen after many years of kind of setting a standard for what life is, and then realizing that could all be taken away if he changes one little thing in the past. Definitely released it prematurely, even though that was years in the making. It was just the same thing as Justice League, where it should have had more build-up, wanted to compete with the Avengers, and just didn't work. And the Flashpoint is a big story to adapt, and I don't think that the DCU will do it for decades almost, because they haven't cast a Flash, they haven't decided on a release date for the movie if they make one, and then I don't think they would make a Flashpoint movie for years, probably until the second or third movie if they do a trilogy. So we just need to put some distance now, and that's unfortunate, because Flashpoint is a great storyline, and now we won't see it for maybe 20 or 30 years, and that's maybe a little too much. But think about all the things that Gunn wants to include. He has all these side characters, these B and C tier superheroes. If he hasn't even considered the Flash right now, we're not going to get that for a number of years. I would not be surprised if I get to take my kids as teenagers or adults to see a Flashpoint movie.
I mean, I don't think it's that's long.
Literally what I'm expecting.
I think it's within 5 or 6 years we'll see a new Flash movie.
Okay, Flash movie, yes. I'm talking Flashpoint.
Yeah. I mean, Flashpoint
because Gunn respects deep stories. Yeah, I don't know, because Gunn hasn't done the Marvel thing and been like, here's all the movies I'm going to make. The problem is that he still hasn't announced. Maybe he's not going to do 3 movies a year. Maybe he'll just do 1 or 2. But he hasn't even cast a Flash yet publicly. So I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But we're not talking about the future yet. We're talking about the Flash. What did you think when you?
Well, it's barely a Flashpoint movie, for one thing. It's the loosest adaptation of Flashpoint.
Yes, it has a lot of side stories, but the main goal is that he is changing the past to stop his mom's death. He happens to end up in this universe where he's him. I talk about when I say Flashpoint, I'm talking about him stopping his mother's murder and seeing the repercussions of that. And they're pretty catastrophic. And yes, I agree, they're very loose, but that's what I mean by Flashpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I actually really liked how High Top Films put it. He kind of just calls the whole movie insecure storytelling. Because at its core, there's actually a lot of good stuff. There's some great themes that they kind of introduce, about how decisions both big and small can have these earth-shattering and deeply personal consequences, and how some of your best work and moments in life can be born. We got those great themes that kind of run throughout the whole movie, but then they're all overcrowded by annoying humor, half-cooked CGI, and meaningless cameos. And I will say, too, with what you were saying about Barry's character, he's probably the most Barry in this movie compared to his previous appearances. But the other Barry is so bad. That character was so annoying. He chortled like a dolphin, and I was not a fan. Yeah, that's exactly what he sounded like. And I hated it.
I'm impressed with myself.
I was spot on. I haven't seen it in so long, but you just brought me back to it. I actually do think I don't like Ezra Miller in the role of the Flash, and I think his portrayal is never really that accurate, but I think they did him partially right in this movie, I would say.
How so?
There's a scene after they save Supergirl, and they're in the Batcave. She asks him, "Why did you help me?" And he responds with, "Because he needed help," which I think really captures the essence of the Flash really well.
That's it. We can go home now.
That might have been the only like right moment in the whole movie, but I mean they got that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like. What did High Top say about it?
Insecure storytelling.
And insecure storytelling. Yeah, I mean, relying on cameos so much, very cheap cameos at the end, which just infuriate me to the point of like we've been talking, or the area of animation and AI and deepfakes is something I follow closely, and the conversation of do people own their likeness, and like do I own my face? Literally, please don't do this. Anyone could come to this podcast, take my face and or voice, and train a data set to make me say or do anything, and that is scary.
Someone do it.
Don't do it. I don't think. Well, one, you'd have to spend money on it, and I don't even want to spend money on that. So, but more importantly, is like we haven't had to deal with can you steal someone's identity more than just their credit card or something. Like you can make somebody say something that you don't want. Like somebody said we are on the brink of nuclear war just because anyone could make a deep fake of any politician or person in power in our government saying we have launched 5 nukes at a foreign country. There is no way to verify that before that other country is just like, we can't verify it and launches theirs. So that's the scary part of this AI deepfake stuff. And I know that's a little bit dramatic here, but when it came to those cameos of the old actors, like first off, they don't even add anything to the story. They don't mean anything to Barry. Those characters mean nothing to him. They're just there for eye candy. And then even bringing Michael Keaton back was sort of a disgrace to kind of have him killed off so many times and not really be the same Batman. Or he wasn't the same Batman. It's not the same universe. And then at least Affleck said that he had perfected the Batman character by that movie, even if everything was going into the trash after Aquaman 2. But there's so much to talk about. We could probably do a whole episode on it. There was so much bad CGI. I remember the opening scene
with the babies. At the very least,
they could have put more work in with the babies. At the very least, they could have spent a little bit more money making sure the opening scene looked good, and then let the rest of it be trash. But I remember watching it. I was like, "Is this real? This is so ridiculous."
Just with the concept of that scene, who thought it was good? Like, we're gonna just have Barry save a bunch of babies. Who wanted to see that?
There's that. It showed that he was a good person. He also saved a dog and a nurse.
It's so weird seeing him throw babies around.
Yeah, and again, you kind of at that point are thinking, well, isn't just touching them going to make them explode because of you're suddenly shoving them or something with super speed? And then also depowering him in that scene of making sure he had enough protein. That was, I mean, it showed. Well, okay,
and that's not really depowering.
It makes sense, and it's been explored in other media, but then it doesn't come back. It's just for that scene.
No,
he never needs it again.
In the
moment. I did like seeing Jeremy Irons again as Alfred. I really like him as Alfred. Him and Andy Serkis make good Alfreds. All of the Alfred. I don't think there's been a bad Alfred.
And Michael Caine.
Michael Caine. That's why I thought of it. I was like, and Michael Caine. Why am I saying? All of them are really great.
To talk about the multiverse cameos a bit more, I mean, I think you touched on the morality of it, but also it's just like they don't look good. You can tell all of them are fake.
Yeah.
I mean, even with like Nick Cage, who said he was on set, he looks as fake as everyone else. I think around the same time, the show Titans, which is a show I don't watch, had a scene where Beast Boy was at the center of the universe or something, and he saw all these different worlds, and they just used stock footage or old footage to show all these different universes, and it looked way better than this did, instead of these creepy, lifeless, dead people.
Yeah, and some of them didn't even give their permission to be used. I think the George Reeves, not the YouTuber who makes George Reeves, sure.
What are you talking about? Christopher
Reeves, or whatever the Superman actor. I said Michael Reeves because I was watching Michael Reeves video.
The black and white one or the color one?
Either one. One of them. Yes. one of them, their family estate did not give them permission, did not give the studio permission to use their likeness. And that's even worse when it's a dead actor who should be done making movies. Like, you can't just bring anyone back without asking first. Even if you can, doesn't mean you should.
Oh, and there was also, do you remember the Jay Garrick that pops up quickly in that scene?
I think so, yeah. It's just, you just see the metal helmet and he like waves or something.
And you see his face, and it looks just like Teddy Sears, who played the fake Jay Garrick in the Flash show, which was weird. But then when Teddy Sears was asked about it, he was like, unless I did it in my sleep, I didn't do that.
Oh my gosh. They didn't... The writers just watched season 1 and the first half of season 2. No, the first half of season 2 before it's revealed that he's not Jay Garrick.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, that's Jay Garrick? That's awesome. Let's put him in.
Because it looks exactly like Teddy Sears.
I didn't see that. Yeah. There's so much wrong about it. And it's so funny. It's one of those, it's like Madam Web. It's so fun to watch it, to make fun of it. And at least we have that. And again, these are the movies that were like, at least it's not this. We have a new low. We have a new standard for really, really bad. I will say, back to Justice League, I liked the visuals of the Speed Force, or at least super speed that Barry does when he turns back time. Not necessarily saying it makes sense, but him like putting his hand out and making everything kind of freeze around him, but then he's running and the ground is forming under him. That was a cool visual.
Oh, the Snyder Cut. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Snyder Cut. That looked cool. That's all I got to say about that. The last thing I want to talk about is the future of the Flash. In the DCU. We've kind of talked about it, what it might look like. I believe I'll link a video in the description about what the story should be, or somebody's idea of what the story should be. But one thing that a lot of people are talking about with the DCU is who should play the Flash. And I didn't know if you had anyone in mind. I have a few written down to see what you think.
If they start with Barry Allen. Well, if they don't start with Barry Allen, I want Barry Allen to come in eventually. Or to be like a character who already exists, but he's somewhere else at the moment. But if we're starting with Barry Allen, I want it to be Lucas Till, who's probably a name you have on your list.
I was just looking at that. And there's one on my list, was Lucas Till from X-Men.
I don't know if you ever watched the MacGyver show with him, but if you watch that, that's kind of what really makes me think that he could be a good Barry.
Okay. Somebody else said Tanner Buchanan from Cobra Kai. Some people said Timothée Chalamet. No, these are both hard no's. I think they were just picking people in their 20s who had a nice face.
Someone asked AI who should they.
The one that I actually kind of like.
Barry Allen is not supposed to be sexy.
Oh, hot take. Or not hot take, maybe it's true. This would be my pick, and this is just because I'm most familiar with this actor and like him, is Taron Egerton. He kind of... You're making a face. Let me get through it first. First off, he kind of played the same character in Kingsman, where he was a nerdy child who becomes overpowered and super cool. And I just kind of like his charm. He just kind of struts his stuff, and I don't know if is he actually British, or does he just put on that accent? British actor, yep. So, but he's also older. Oh, he's Welsh. Interesting. He's almost third. He's like 25.
34.
34, never mind. I can't math. Yeah, so he's a little bit older. But I think after seeing what you thought about Lucas Till, I think that'd be a good pick. But again, Gunn doesn't really like to pick big name actors. Yeah. He'll leave it up to some new kid on the block.
Edgerton, I think he's got a little too much charm, I would say. And his jaw's a little too chiseled.
All right, we're talking about chiseled jawlines now.
Might just be my opinion, but...
Yeah, I don't know. I trust Gunn. Maybe. We'll see how Superman pans out.
I think, though... Do you think they should start with Barry, or do you think they should start with Wally?
I think they should start with Wally to mix it up. I think Gunn would do something like that, especially if Wally's more overpowered, as in, from what I know about him, fastest man in the multiverse. I think people are too familiar with Barry, and that's something Gunn would do, is mix it up. Same thing like he did with the Guardians of the Galaxy, where they weren't those characters originally, and he made new ones. Not made new ones, but he made up a new Guardians group for the movies. Yeah, I think he'll do Wally, and I think he will show us a new side of the Flash that will be very interesting. I also think it would be interesting to do a Flash movie in a Nolan style of storytelling. Not Nolan specifically. I just couldn't come up with the idea. An out of order movie, non-linear. It could be pretty interesting to jump back and forth and to figure out which timeline is which, or not timeline, which thing happens first. Not saying it has to happen for it to be a good movie, but that could be interesting.
I think, last year in 2023, we really saw the end of an era for the Flash, with both the show ending and Ezra Miller also being done in the role. Mm-hmm. So I think, James Gunn is really going to be issuing in a new era of the Flash. So I hope he does well with that.
The hierarchy is changing or something like that.
Oh, the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change. I would really say, though, for his first Flash movie, what he really has to do is just keep things simple. I don't really even want a speedster villain in the first movie.
Ooh.
Give us like the Thinker or Captain Cold for this first movie. Yeah. And just really, a villain who's really going to push his limits is what I would say. And don't do any complicated multiverse or time travel stuff in this first one. You can build up to that, but a Flash movie can work a lot like a Spider-Man movie, I would say.
Sure.
We've got some very well received Spider-Man movies, so I think
yes,
a Flash movie does have the potential to work really well.
Well, that's interesting that you say that. It's very Spider-Man-esque in that it can be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man where he can be down to earth. He can have connections to higher A-tier, S-tier superheroes. I mean, he is a pretty A-tier superhero already. But then he also has the ability to bring in multiverse possibilities where Spider-Man can do that as well with the Spider-Verse. So, yeah, it all works together. I like your idea. We'll see what happens in the future.
I'm assuming Gunn's going to do something like that. I think he understands the character well enough, but...
Well, he also said that the Flash movie was the best superhero movie ever. So...
Okay, but he did just start as the CEO of DC. I think there was... there's some pressure on him there, and it's. I think he was kind of told to. Yeah.
He absolutely was told to say that. I guarantee that.
Why did Tom Cruise say it? I don't know.
I'm excited. I know we already talked about this in the DCU episode, but I think we could see a rebirth of superhero movies if Gunn can pull off Superman Legacy and make people excited again. And we could have we think that Marvel's pretty much dead. We kind of talked about Captain America Brave New World trailer that just came out, where that kind of looks promising, but again, their track record hasn't been great. Gunn is starting from scratch, and he could build it again. He could increase the excitement, and I'm looking forward to that if that happens, but we'll see. And it's interesting that he's not going right with the Flash. Like, he's taking his time to build it with individual stories. So I think that the reason we're not getting the Flash for a while is because he's not going to the most popular character right away. Well, Superman's very popular.
Superman is the most popular character.
He is. No, I'm saying people really love the Flash. That's why the show went for so long, is because they thought people wanted it. And yeah, he's a great character. So he's the Spider-Man of DCU.
Yeah, I think he understands too that the character needs some time to breathe after the past 9 years. So
yes, that too. That's a great point. I love that. All right. Well, what did we learn today? And so what we have learned
applies to what I like to
do. We were raised in the church, so that's pretty obvious.
So Seth.
No, honest. What?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Where do you see God's fingerprints in the character of the Flash?
I'm going to reveal what you told me before that we started recording. Zach wanted us to start doing this, and I think it's a great idea. It's just funny that you're just straight up saying it to my face.
Yes.
Where do I see God's fingerprints in the character of the Flash? Yeah, I really think that Barry struggles with fate and letting things be as they are. We obviously don't have superpowers. And so we just kind of, as Christians, we have a hope to look forward to Christ and to know that he will make all things new one day, but that we will have troubles here on earth. We can't do anything to fix that, even if we had superpowers. That's the point of the Flash, is that with all the power in the world, and again, he's not Superman with laser eyes and flight and super strength, but with the power to change reality for the most part, it's not worth it in the end to just... It changes too many things. First off, the butterfly effect is kind of the point. If you change one thing, it'll affect a whole nother thing. But it's not wrong that bad things happen. And Barry thinks that his mother dying is a bad thing. And yeah, it is sad. It's sad that Nora had to die. But again, it's sort of the canon event mindset of where there's some things that just can't be changed. Otherwise, you wouldn't be who you are today. You're a product of your experiences, and that's beautiful. That's not a bad thing in and of itself. Was that satisfactory?
Yes. I would say I've got a Bible verse.
Coming in with the scripture.
Yeah.
The word of the Lord.
In James 1:27, James writes, "Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you." And I think that really encapsulates the character of the Flash really well. You know, he's in it for the little guy. He's not in it for the fame and the fortune. He's there to help those who need help, and no matter what happens to him, he's always going to stay true to his morals and not let the world or whatever evil they might be corrupt him.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. He keeps his eyes focused on the one thing, and that's him and his ability to save people and to make people's lives better with his powers. So I love that. Thank you guys so much for listening or watching. Remember, we are on YouTube or Spotify. We are also on Instagram, Facebook, kind of Facebook, same thing as Instagram. Facebook, Instagram, Discord. Join our Discord. That'll be fun. And hopefully all of the Flash fans will correct us in where we went wrong today. So
Please do.
Please do. It's good to be back. Again, if you haven't listened to the Paul Acey episode, please do that. He and I had a great conversation. Zach really liked it, apparently, and I didn't know that he listened to it.
I mean, that's where the God's fingerprints thing came from, because I like that a lot.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah, he again, if you don't follow our announcements, whether on Instagram stories or Discord updates channel, Paul is a reviewer for Plugged In at Focus on the Family, and he has a lot more experience with movies than I do. Was gracious enough to come on for an hour-ish, and yeah, we had a great topic about Christians watching movies, parenting in movies, and all that. Even my parents liked it, so that was great. Go listen to that, listen to some of the other ones, and know that we are back for the foreseeable future. No foreseeable breaks yet. We will see what the future holds. But until next week, know that you are loved. God bless.
Peace out,
brethren.